We have quite a wonderful panel of speakers here this morning. I'm going to just not interview them. I'm an anthropologist, so I'm always interviewing. I'm going to be introducing them to you today. Let's see. Our first speaker, who, in the interest of undermining hierarchy, gave me his place at the table here today, Dr. Andrew Achenbaum, professor of history and social work at the University of Houston. According to his profile on his faculty homepage, he says that the thing that he likes best is teaching and mentoring. I poked around on his CV and found a significant amount of other things that he does as well. He's participated in the Division of Geriatric and Palliative Care at the Department of Internal Medicine, the University of Texas Health Center. He's written several books. He's participated in the Institute of Spirituality and Health at the Texas Medical Center, Institute of Medical Humanities, and more than I can actually read in a few minutes here. Okay, I'm going to stop. He told me to stop. Okay, our second speaker this morning is going to be Julie Cohen of Community Relations from PBS. Let's see, let me find my notes. She is an award-winning producer who joined Houston PBS as an associate producer in November 1996. She began her career in the Boston area before moving to Houston. She has tackled a number of important topics, including violence against women, male incest, racism, and the origins of hatred. For her work, Julie has won over 30 national, regional, and local awards, including 7 Emmys for journalistic excellence. Okay. Next, we'll be hearing from Dr. John C. Raines, professor of religion at Temple University. He's seated down here at the end of the table. He's the author and editor of 8 books and numerous articles. He was trained at Union Seminary at in New York City in Christian social ethics. His area of interest is religion and political economy. Part of his formative years, in addition to his formal education, were his participation in the civil rights movement and in the effort against the anti-Vietnam War struggle. In both instances, he was arrested and jailed. He's had numerous Fulbright Awards in Southeast Asia and worked in places such as Malaysia and Indonesia. He's been chair of the Department of Religion, president of the Interfaith Council on the Holocaust of Philadelphia, and a co-host of the award-winning Saturday morning ABC Philadelphia talk show Dialog. He serves on the board of directors at Temple University Press and the Religious Consultation on Population, Reproductive Health, and Ethics. Okay. After that, we'll be hearing from Dr. Christine Kovic, my esteemed colleague at the University of Houston-Clear Lake, where she's an associate professor of anthropology and cross-cultural studies. I just misplaced her bio, Christine. There we go. Christine has conducted research on the topics of human rights and religion in Mexico and the United States since 1993. She is currently engaged in a research project exploring security and human rights of Central American migrants crossing southern Mexico en route to the United States. Her previous research on indigenous rights, religion, and social justice in southern Mexico has been published in Mayan Voices for Human Rights, Displaced Catholics in Highland Chiapas, and she was a co-editor of another book entitled Women of Chiapas, Making History in Times of Struggle and Hope. Okay. Our last speaker, right here, Dr. Javier Gonzalez Martinez. He's the director of the School of Theology at the Universidad Intercontinental in Mexico. He's a priest and also the dean for the School of Theology there. He's participated as a missionary in Angola and Kenya, along with interfaith dialogue groups working with Muslims, Christians, and traditional African religions. He's also worked to improve the social benefits that are given to poor communities on issues of health, education, and done some work also in Africa and Mexico on the topics of alcoholism and drug use. So we have a very esteemed group of people here to speak. Without further hesitation, let me go ahead and welcome Dr. Andrew Achenbaum.
Good morning. I'd like to call my talk Poverty 101 because it's the first talk, because there's no PowerPoint, and except for one passage, there should be nothing that will ruin your indigestion processes for lunch. I'm a historian by training, and so what I look for are continuities and changes over time. In this talk, brief that it is, I will specify 5 continuities and cavalierly talk about 2 changes. And I'm going to focus on something that I hope most of you know nothing about, so that I sound erudite. I want to talk about the first English colony in the New World. God bless the British. In the first panel this morning, they were VFI'd as a great empire. They were really Gomer Pyle compared to the Spanish, the Dutch, and the French. They tried, without any success, to pick a colony, and then, bless their hearts, that's a southern phrase, they picked this wonderfully salubrious part of Virginia, and in 1607 sent people from England to Virginia. They found it, which is better than we can say for the Puritans and the Pilgrims, but 45 of them died on the passage over seas. 45. That left them with 101 men and 4 boys. I could go down that path, but I have other objects that I'd like to talk about. I feel so sorry for them. It's sort of like a guy from Michigan moving down to Texas on August 1st. It's a strange, strange land. They had heat. Virginia is hellishly humid and hot in the summer. And they had winters. Heck, Washington shut down for a quarter of an inch of snow. You can imagine what they had to deal with. They had insects. They had boars. They had Native Americans. More of them later. But what really got them was malaria. They had no public health. They had no idea what they were going to get. And so there are these incredible environmental hazards. And that's the first continuity of poverty. Poverty always presents itself in a place that looks great and turns out to be god-awful. And it becomes god-awful because of the second continuity. They had no idea how to cope with this environment. And why should they? If we look at the people who survived, those 101 men and 4 boys, most of them were the wastrel sons of gentry, who would have been in jail if they weren't going to Jamestown. They brought their butlers, their valets. They brought goldsmiths and silversmiths because they expected Virginia to be paved with gold. How rude, how cruel, how disastrous. Well, we'll have to farm. Farm, what's that mean? You'll have to hunt. Hunt. Boy, go hunt for me. They couldn't do it. This gang, looking sort of like my basic training unit, lacked the right skills for what they had to do. And because they lacked the right skills, they were vulnerable. People who have skills rarely find themselves in a bad mess. But if there's a mismatch between the skills they have and what they have, they're in trouble. They have to rely on friends. I have spent an entire life of virtual incompetence being mentored and helped by friends. And in this setting, since the Boers couldn't do it, it had to be the Native Americans. And sometimes they were extraordinarily friendly. But after all, these white guys are coming onto our neighborhood, desecrating our place. They weren't always friendly. And so King James, in his infinite wisdom, sent 9 ships to serve as reinforcements, with 400 men aboard. Men. Get the theme? There was a plague on one of those ships. And so one of the ships arrived fairly much as an aging place. And one of the things that we also know about plagues is they spread. We don't even have to talk about intimate contact. Plagues spread. And so as soon as those ships arrived, in British Jamestown history, we have the starving times. Starving times. There's no way to prettify that, not even on PBS. What that means is that they ate their livestock. Oh, what the heck, I promised you one passage of indigestion. They cannibalized. They went to the graves of whites who had died and Native Americans. You can fill in the rest of the dots. Those of you who are at this morning's scheduled session know that violence was one of the great undercurrents of the discussion. And in any discussion of violence and poverty, we have to introduce that particular theme. By the end of the winter of 1610, 90% of the colony is dead. That's impressive, even for an impoverished area. But it raises that third continuity. With poverty, either causing it or as a result of it, comes sickness and death. Mortality rates, morbidity rates are greater among those who don't have access to public health, those who don't have basic knowledge of medicine. And then things, this is after all an American story, things begin to look up. And they look up, I hate to say because of one white guy, but it is largely because of one white guy, a fellow named John Rolfe, who watched the Indians growing tobacco and then decided he could make a better blend. Apparently he had gone to Texas A&M. And so in 1612, he begins to grow tobacco. Even smarter than that, he woos and then marries the chief's daughter, a late teenager named Pocahontas, in 1614. And then in 1616, entrepreneurial fellow that he is, he begins to sell tobacco in London, and he takes his wife abroad. Now, get this image. He puts her in a gilded cage, because after all, she's this rare specimen. The British eat it up while they smoke up. By 1619, they're exporting 10 tons of tobacco from Virginia. By 1639, they're exporting 750 tons. Things are looking good for the white guys in Virginia. And we get then to the fourth continuity. Those who are poor may be with us always, but they're not always the same poor people. Fortunes rise and fall, depending on the circumstances and the times. But if you're close to being near poor, the odds of you staying poor are much greater than if you're John Rolfe, who made the situation moot because he died at the age of 32. 1619, the first year they exported serious amounts of tobacco from Virginia, women came. Well, if you put a princess into a gilded cage, you can imagine what women's rights were like in Virginia early on. Sexism is an important part of this story because men and women really aren't equal. 1619 to 1920, 300 years will go before women get the franchise. And those of you who are at Church Chief Dearden this morning heard about the systematic acts of violence against women which occur in this community today. Another group that had not been in the New World came. They were Africans, transported, rarely voluntarily, Although, and now watch this, the language was the same. Most people